Gopichana Vallabham Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vajradhana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayam Vishwapad Paramātmā Parvajakacharya Astarsata Sri Srimada's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premananda. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 28, Kapila's Instructions on Devotional Service, Text 12. Yadā manaḥ svam virajam yogena su-samāhitam kāṣṭhāṁ bhagavato dhyāyet sva-nāsāgrāvalokanaḥ yadā manaḥ svam virajam yogena su-samāhitam kāṣṭhām bhagavato dhyāyet sva-nāsā-agra yadā manaḥ svam virajam yogena su-samāhitam kāṣṭhām bhagavato dhyāyet sva-nāsā-agra yadā manaḥ svam virajam yogena su-samāhitam kāṣṭhām bhagavato dhyāyet sva-nāsā-agra sadāmanasa virajam yogena su-samāhitam kāṣṭhām bhagavato dhyāyet sva-nāsā-agra virajam yogena su-samāhitam kāṣṭhām bhagavato dhyāyet avalokanaḥ yogena su-samāhitam kāṣṭhām bhagavato dhyāyet sva-nāsā-agra yadā svam virajam yogena su-samāhitam kāṣṭhāṁ bhagavato dhyāyet sva-nāsā-avalokanaḥ. Okay. Yadā, when, manaḥ, the mind, svam, own, virajam, purified, yogena, by yoga practice, su-samāhitam, controlled, kāṣṭhāṁ, the plenary expansion, Bhagavataḥ, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dhyāyet, one should meditate upon. Sva-nāsā-agra, the tip of one's nose. Avalokanaḥ, looking at. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation: when the mind is perfectly purified by this practice of yoga, one should concentrate on the tip of the nose with half-closed eyes and see the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: it is clearly mentioned here that one has to meditate upon the expansion of Viṣṇu. The word kaṣṭhām refers to Paramātmā, the expansion of Viṣṇu. Bhagavato refers to Lord Kṛṣṇa, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Godhead is Kṛṣṇa. From him comes the first expansion, Baladeva, and from Baladeva come Saṅkarṣaṇa, Aniruddha, and many other forms, followed by the puruṣa-avatāras. As mentioned in the previous verses, puruṣa-archanam, this purusha is represented by the Paramātmā or Supersoul. A description of the Supersoul upon whom one must meditate will be given in the following verses. In this verse, it is clearly stated that one must meditate by fixing the vision on the tip of the nose and concentrating one's mind on the kala, or plenary expansion of Viṣṇu. Om Jnana-tirmandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Kṛṣṇa 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, Prateya Dhyayatam Viṣṇu, Tretayam Yajuto Makai, Dvaparar Paracharyayam, Kalautad Hari Kirtanat. In different ages, different yugas, different forms of God realization and self-realization are recommended. These pastimes that we're reading about now took place in Satya Yuga. And during the Satya Yuga, the recommended authorized process of God realization and self-realization is this meditation as part of the yoga system. And in the next stage, following this Treta Yuga, the recommended process for self-realization and God realization is the performance of opulent sacrifices. And in the next age, the Dwapara Yuga, the recommended process is opulent worship of deities, opulent temple worship. And in the present age of Kali, the recommended process of self-realization and God realization is Hari Kirtan, the Saṅkarṣaṇa movement, the chanting, congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord and allied activities. So, but we can see that Srila Prabhupada introduced into our practice of devotional service more than just the Hari Kirtan. You know, we have some deity worship that's going on, which was the recommended process, you know, elaborate temple worship in Dwapara Yuga. We have some fire sacrifices, which was the recommended process in Treta Yuga. And we also have some activities of the meditative variety, the meditation variety. So, but all of these things are accompanied by Hari Kirtan in our movement. You know, yes, there's temple worship, but it's accompanied by Hari Kirtan. Yes, there are some sacrifices, but they're accompanied by Hari Kirtan. Yes, there is some meditation involved, but it's meditation on Kṛṣṇa, and it's also accompanied by Hari Kirtan. So, in some form or another, these activities are present not just in the Kṛṣṇa consciousness movement, but even in society in general, these activities have penetrated to some extent. Like there are yoga studios on almost every street corner now. So I kind of encountered this in my own way, you know, before I came to the Kṛṣṇa consciousness movement. I was in one bookstore, one kind of New Age sort of bookstore when I was younger, in my early 20s. And I picked up a book about yoga, and I thought, well, this seemed interesting, let me try it. Of course, the best thing when you're trying to learn something is to go to an appropriate teacher. You know, doing things on your own can be strange. But, you know, and plus, you know, there's so many different kinds of yoga going on. So I looked in this book, and the first thing it said you had to do was take a cloth, dip it in water, put it up your nose, and pull it through. Yeah, so I did that. Not recommended. And I've told this story before, but some of you may not have heard it. When I was young and, you know, trying to make my way into the practice of yoga on my own, I got this idea that I was kind of frustrated with material existence. So I'd read in the yoga book that the yogis go to the Himalaya mountains. So I was in the United States. Actually, I was living in Florida at the time. I decided, well, where's the Himalayan mountains? You know, I decided, I'd heard of this place, Boulder, Colorado, you know, where I heard there were mountains and kind of spiritual energies and things like that. So I decided to go to Boulder and go up into the mountains. And I had read that the yogis, when they go into the Himalayas, they don't come down. They just stay there until they leave their bodies in mystic fire. So I decided I was going to do that. So I flew to Denver, took a bus to Boulder, and as soon as I got out of the bus station, I started walking towards the mountains. And I walked up into the mountains. I found a place to sit down, and I decided I'm going to stay here and fast until I leave my body. So I lasted about a day and a half. Then came down the mountain, went to an Italian restaurant, had some lasagna and eggplant parmesan, and went back to my life in St. Petersburg, Florida. So, fortunately, I came in contact with the Kṛṣṇa consciousness movement and learned something about the Bhakti Yoga system. And in the first book I got, which was Bhagavad-gītā, I could see what Srila Prabhupada's attitude towards the Ashtanga Yoga system was. He was respectful of it because it's a bona fide system. But as he's pointing out here, the purpose of it ultimately is to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in Bhagavad-gītā, that's also stated, yogenam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmana shradavan bhajate yo mam same yuktatamo mataha. Kṛṣṇa himself is the Yogeshwar, the master of all systems of yoga. And he says, of all the different kinds of yogas and yogis who are practicing them, the one who is constantly meditating upon me with love and devotion, that is the best and the most dear to me, the highest of all. So we're getting here in Bhagavad-gītā, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the system of Bhakti Yoga, as Srila Prabhupada has introduced it, we're getting the real essence of the yoga system. And if one carefully studies the matter, one can see, as Srila Prabhupada often said, that this practice of Ashtanga Yoga, it's a little difficult for people in this age of Kali to practice. There's the verse in the Bhagavad-gītā where it says, well, one has to keep good posture with the head, the neck, and the body perfectly in alignment, like Bhagavati was showing. That's where I fail right there. The very first thing. And then it said you have to keep the body perfectly still, settled. That again is very difficult. You have to keep the microphone perfectly in line. It's very difficult in this age of Kali. So then you have to look at your nose, through the tip of your nose, through half-closed eyes. And then there's brahmacharyena. One has to become perfectly celibate, undisturbed by sex desire. So it's not such an easy thing in the Kali Yuga to remain perfectly still in a sacred place, have your body perfectly aligned. But here we can see in these chapters of the Srimad Bhagavatam that in the Satya Yuga, when this was the authorized system of self-realization and God realization, some instruction is being given by Kapila Dev to Devahuti about these things, but the main focus is on the ultimate result of it, which is meditation upon the Lord in the heart, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is mentioned in this verse as kāṣṭhāṁ bhagavato, which Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, that means the super soul. So, yes, if you look at the Ashtanga Yoga system, you can see it starts with yama and niyama, the things that are to be done and not to be done. And if you look at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, at what those things are, yes, you have to be non-violent. In other words, don't be killing things. You have to study svadhyaya, study the Shastras, like we're studying the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So they're almost the same, because we have our do's and don'ts, also our yama and niyama. And then there's asana and pranayama, sitting and controlling the breathing. But we control the breathing in the sense of controlling our speech, which is manifested by the breath. So we control our speech by not speaking prajalpa, nonsense, speaking about Kṛṣṇa and Kṛṣṇa's service. And we have our asana. We want to live in the association of devotees, come to a spiritual place and sit and hear and chant, and also render devotional service, engaging the senses in that way. But in the Ashtanga Yoga system, after asana and pranayama comes pratyahara, means withdrawing the senses from the sense objects. Now, that's a little difficult in the present age, so our process is to engage the senses in devotional service and devotional activities. And in that way, by engaging the senses with spiritual sense objects and spiritual activities, they automatically become detached from materialistic activities, from impious activities. So that system is there. And ultimately, as Kṛṣṇa explains in the Bhagavad Gita, man-mana bhava mad-bhakto, simply focus your mind on me and become a devotee. Savai-mana Kṛṣṇa padaravindayo. Maharaj Ambarish did. He focused his mind on Kṛṣṇa. And that is ultimately what we're meant to do. So it's also the same in the Ashtanga Yoga system if you look at it very carefully. because after pratyahara, withdrawing the senses from the sense objects, there's dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, which are successive stages of concentration of the mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in the Yoga Sutras it says that the result of that is one becomes self-realized. One realizes one's sarupa, and one comes to the stage of Isha Paridana, which means Ishvara Pranidhana, which means dedicating one's mind and activities to the Ishvara, the personality of Godhead, the Lord within the heart. So the same thing is being mentioned here. And it's also mentioned in the Yoga Sutras that the way that one meditates on the Ishvara is by mantra, the sacred syllable Om in that case, whereas we do Hari Kirtan. So ultimately there are parallels between the two systems, but they're recommended for different ages. Now we're in the age of Kali, Kali Dosha Nidhi Virajam, Asti Eko Mahajbuna, Kirtanadeva Kṛṣṇasya. So there's the Kali Yuga is like an ocean of faults, but there's one good thing about it is that one can be liberated, delivered, become self-realized and God-realized by the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. So these different considerations are there. They're mentioned in this verse and in Srila Prabhupada's purport. Of course, ultimately, we're not interested in just the super soul. Kṛṣṇa is the ultimate source of both the impersonal Brahmajyoti, Brahman, it's his bodily effulgence, Paramātmā or super soul is his localized expansion, and that's ultimately what we're interested in, is the personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, who is the source of the super soul and the Brahman effulgence. So I'll stop there. Any question or comment? Yes? Somebody else had their hand up first. Oh, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the very nice class. So in the purport it is mentioned that the yogi should concentrate his mind on the Paramātmā feature of the Lord, right? And Prabhupada also in the purport mentions about the Paramātmā, how the Paramātmā is expansion of the Lord, right? So the Lord has three features, right? Bhagavan, Paramātmā and Brahmajyoti. And it is here in Ashtanga Yoga, it is mentioned that you focus on the Paramātmā feature. My question is, why Paramātmā feature? What is so special about Paramātmā feature? Why not Bhagavan or why not Brahmajyoti? Why Paramātmā?
Well, in one sense, it says in the verse here, the Supreme, and see the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it appears that Srila Prabhupada is here taking the Paramātmā as a form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. which can be, they are all features, the Brahman, Paramātmā, they're features of the personality of Godhead, and they're considered here to be equivalent, but because I thought about that as well, and in the coming verses we're going to get a description of exactly what are the features that are being meditated upon. So Kṛṣṇa explains, yadā mam prapadyante tam tatthaiva bhajamyaham. The absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, can be approached in different ways. If one approaches through the system of jnana yoga, the supreme absolute truth is revealed as the Brahman effulgence. But from that platform, devotees can come to an understanding of the ultimate source. If one approaches the absolute truth by the system of this Ashtanga Yoga, you come to the platform of Paramātmā. And if one approaches Kṛṣṇa through the system, one approaches the absolute truth through the system of Bhakti Yoga, then one comes to understand the personality of Godhead himself, Ishvara Paramā Kṛṣṇa. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his highest aspect. Paranti tattvavidas tatvam nijgana madhvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavanyeti shabdite. So those who are interested in the absolute truth, they realize there's three features of the absolute truth, and depending upon the way that one approaches the absolute truth, one will realize it either as Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan, according to how one approaches Kṛṣṇa. That's as far as I can go in trying to answer your question. Archita?
We have from this same pastime the example of Kardama Muni. He was also practicing this method, meditating on the Lord, and the Lord appeared to him outside. So it depends on what you want. As you're saying, if you're actually looking for the supreme absolute truth, then He will reveal himself. Kardama Muni was meditating for years and years, and then the Lord appeared. Dhruva Maharaj, he ultimately wanted to see God so he can ask God for a kingdom. So he was meditating on the Lord in the heart, Paramātmā, and then the Lord appeared outside. He couldn't see him anymore. He opened his eyes, and there he was, outside. So it depends on you, what you want. It's not that you're limited. You have to stop at the Paramātmā stage. If the Ashtanga yogi is meditating in the right mood, then the Lord will appear in person. But even in the bhakti path, we see that not everybody is worshiper of Radha Kṛṣṇa. Some are worshiping Lakshmi Narayan. They're attracted to the four-handed form. So there's no one ultimate right thing for everybody.
Okay, Guru Bhakti.
Prabhu, is Patanjali recognized by the previous acharyas? I mean, he gets a lot of attention in classes, but I mean, is there anything in the commentary of any previous acharyas about Patanjali? Does Patanjali say, for instance, that we're supposed to be meditating on Paramātmā, or what to speak of that the goal is ultimately to develop love for Kṛṣṇa. Now, is he just an authority because he's a big name in the yoga world and we're kind of, dealing with that? Or is it actually somebody who has some status within Vaishnavism?
I mention him in this connection because Srila Prabhupada does from time to time, mention him as in connection with this yoga system as being an authority on it. That's why I've done it. I have to confess, I don't know what, other than Srila Prabhupada, what the other acharyas have said about him in particular, but that's as far as I can go with that. Anyone have any? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.